like I said, extinction means that the behavior will eventually disappear. Now, this is important when we're trying to rid someone of negative thoughts, of uh, undesirable behaviors. Then we may want to extinguish that undesirable behavior. Okay. Your textbook gave the example of children and children wanting certain things and doing certain things, and children do this quite often. Parents unwittingly sometimes reinforce negative behavior. Okay, and we all kind of participate in that kind of can get sucked down that hole in terms of reinforcing non positive behavior. One of the great techniques for not to extinguishing a behavior is to not respond or ignore that behavior, even though the person or the child or the animal may participate in the behavior or repeatedly participate in the behavior. If they don't get a reinforcement for their behavior, for their actions, then those behaviors would eventually extinguish. Okay, they would eventually extinguish. Individuals, animals continue a behavior because the behavior is being reinforced in some way. They're getting attention, they are getting information that reinforces that behavior. They are, or the animal is receiving some reward or something that they deemed as rewarding, even though the person who may be giving the reward doesn't realize that is rewarding for the person, and the person continues participating, or the animal continues participating in that behavior. Okay, so this is kind of the reasoning behind, if you want to decrease a behavior, is that you don't reward the behavior, and that the rewarding of the behavior may even be as simple as ignoring what the individual or the animal is participating in or doing to extinguish that particular behavior. Okay, so extinction is how we extinguish the behaviors in terms of removing the reinforcer, not giving the reinforcement. That is what we call the procedure of extinction. So it's something that was rewarded before. So say a child is say a child runs in the house, and every time the child is running around the house, the parent inadvertently tells the child to come over here and sit down and eat. So the child their running may be reinforced by the reward of the food, even though we don't want the child to run in the house. Okay, so the procedure of extinction would be, what do we need to do to avoid to stop the child running in the house? We have to take away the reinforcement. Okay, if you remember before, we talked about a discriminative stimulus, and the discriminative stimulus was something that gave the individual a cue that something was on its way, the reward was on its way, or a stimulus to trigger a certain response was on its way. That's how oftentimes those kinds of things happen. So a person may say something based upon a stimulus that doesn't have anything to do with what the reinforcement or the reward is. But the statement that the person makes is the anticipatory signal that the reward is coming for them. So in the case of our kid is running, and we tell them, come over here and sit down. Saying to them, coming over here and sit down, is the discriminative stimulus indicating the reward of food is coming. So the child will continue to run because the food is the reinforcer and the food is rewarding. So when we want to extinguish, we need to take away what's reinforcing to the individual. So if you're dealing with difficult people, the one thing to extinguish those what's happening with the difficult people, one way is to ignore or don't reinforce their actions. Okay, so that will decrease their interaction or decrease their behaviors. What may be rewarding for that individual who tries to keep interacting with you is that they are getting reinforced because they want attention, or they want to interact with people because they're not interacting with individuals. So the goal is, if we want that behavior to decrease, we have to extinguish it. So we have to go through a process of extinction to decrease the response strength of what is happening. Okay, so the example we have in the book is the child whining, a child whining. We can take whining in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be a child. Lots of people whine about particular things, but we could decrease the whining by taking away what's reinforcing for them. Okay, so what we inadvertently did at the beginning is, when the child whined, they got candy. Okay, and this may occur like at the grocery store. I always use this example. Oftentimes parents are with their kids at the grocery store, and there's lots of enticing things that are around the grocery store. A lot of the enticing things around the grocery store are related to quick foods, getting your attention with it. And so with kids, it's often candy and things, and they see it and they bug their parents about wanting that item. And usually this happens with smaller kids. Bigger kids have their own monies to buy and they can do what they want with their monies if they get an allowance or something to that effect. But oftentimes these are little kids, and they want the cookies or candies or gum that they see, and they may get very vocal about it, or even display some inappropriate behavior, and a parent may inadvertently increase or reward the behavior by giving in and giving them the candy. Okay, so what the child learns is that acting up, displaying these kind of behaviors in the public space when the candy is available or near the thing that they want, they can get that reward by participating in that behavior. Okay, so how would we would have to go through the process of extinguishing that behavior due to the fact that we want to decrease that behavior. So the behavior was reinforced by having the candy. Now we want to take the reinforcer away to decrease the whining behavior. Okay. So extinction is an important aspect of applying extinction is that we need to know what the consequences will be if we withhold the reinforcer. Okay, and we need to understand how the reinforcer is maintaining the behavior. So does this child really love candy? So therefore they're going to continue whining and whining because they love candy? Is the reinforcer itself maintaining the behavior? If that's the case, then it may be a little bit more difficult to extinguish the behavior because the reinforcer is something that is very strong and significant for the individual child. So this is the question that was in your textbook around extinction and whether extinction is a procedure or a process. Okay. in relationship to this case scenario. So I want you to read this case scenario. Whenever Jana's friend Carla phoned late in the evening, she would invariably complain about her coworkers, to which Jana would listen, pretty intently. But as these phone calls became more and more frequent, Jana wondered if she was reinforcing Carla's behavior of phoning and complaining. So she decides to screen her late night evening calls and not answer any calls from Carla. Okay. Eventually, Carla stopped phoning at the time, and they resume a normal friendship that excluded the lengthy complaints over the phone. Jana used blank procedure or process of extinction when she stopped answering Carla's late evening calls, while the blank procedure or process of extinction is the eventual stopping of the calls. Okay, so here we have a case scenario where it appears that the individual is being reinforced by a pretty normal behavior in relationship to phone calling, but Jana doesn't want to listen to the annoying complaints. Okay, so what did she decide to do? She decides to extinguish the complaining that's being reinforced by her picking up the phone and calling, okay, by a process or a procedure she used of stop answering those late evening calls. So she actually had to start some kind of procedure to ignore, decrease the reinforcement of those particular behaviors. And the process in which she eventually decreased the conversations over the complaints worked in relationship to extinguishing such calls. Now, it may sound very simple in relationship to this, and you have to really think about this, especially when you're interacting with people, that if you're going to interact with someone, this often happens in the digital space as well. I think social media is a really good example of that. Oftentimes, people will post or say something, and their goal and objective may not be to get a response, but the responses, the likes, the agreements, the acknowledgement may become very reinforcing for them. So therefore, they start continuing doing the posts and the things that become very reinforcing for them, and people continue to react to it. So the procedure is they continue the reinforcement is they get the various accolades and the attention that they want, and therefore, even if they're presenting not so positive things or crazy things or maybe very good things, maybe fun things, they continue to do that because they're getting the reinforcement of the likes, of the comments. If we didn't like that, if we didn't want to see that, then the way to extinguish that would be to not reinforce by not posting or giving the likes to the individual. Because if the individual is doing all this work but not getting any kind of reinforcement, 9 times out of 10, they will stop or decrease that particular behavior or that particular work. Okay. Now, not to say that when you're in the process of extinction, anytime you're in the process of extinction, you're going to get some negative things happen. Okay, because think about it. Something was being very rewarding and reinforcing for the individual, and now it's taken away. Okay, now they're not getting the attention. Now they're not getting the candy. Now they're not getting that money. Okay, and the person will either participate in activities, a burst of activities to get the reinforcement, the reward back, or they may get very upset that there is not the reward coming. They may feel sad because the reward is not coming. All these things can happen when you're participating in the extinction procedure in the process of extinction. Okay. Remember, B.F. Skinner said that there's no such thing as free will, that everything in the world has a behavior, elicited and antecedent, and a consequence. Okay, so if we take on the true nature of what behavioralism is in relationship to what B.F. Skinner is saying, we talk about, we have antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. So an antecedent is kind of like a discriminative stimulus. It may trigger the person to think about something. They have the behavior, and the consequences is the action of the behavior. And B.F. Skinner says, through these various behavioral techniques, we can change individuals' behaviors, change their behaviors, change their patterns of thinking, changing their interactions through utilizing these behavioral techniques. A lot of people think psychology is common sense. Psychology is a science. It is a science. It's based upon true and tried, proven methods. And as a result, we know these methods can, if we utilize them in a step-by-step process, will change behaviors. Okay? So remember, if we go back to this idea of behavior and reinforcers, and Jana's friend was calling and complaining, and she was picking up the phone, and Carla was talking about whatever she wanted to talk about, and Jana was like, I can't do this anymore. Listen to this complaining on the phone. So let me stop this right now. And she said, I'm going to stop this right now because I'm not going to pick up my phone when she calls. And eventually she'll stop calling because I'm not picking up the phone. Okay, which that's what occurred. However, in the process of Jana doing that with Carla, several things might have happened in the process of extinguishing her behavior. Okay. One thing that can occur is what we call extinction bursts. So when we're in the process of extinguishing that behavior that we want to see gone, that behavior may have a temporary increase in intensity while we're in process of extinguishing it. So in the case of Jana and Carla might have called, when she didn't pick up the phone, she might have called 3 and 4 times in one night. Okay, in hopes that Jana would pick up her phone call. Okay, so she may be kind of excessive in her phone calling, or in some cases texting, and that usually is temporary, and the intensity increases, but it eventually will decrease, because Carla realized no matter how many times I'm going to call, or if I'm going to blow up her phone, she's not going to pick up. Okay. The other things that can happen is that Carla could vary her behavior to the extinction process. So she may do a burst of calls, maybe do a few calls, maybe stop one day and then resume kind of the burst of calls, So she kind of varies in her response of the extinguishing process. And where she, some days she realizes she's not going to pick up the phone, but the next day she'll call excessively, hoping that she'll pick up the phone. So that's the increase in the variability. Okay. Then we can also have emotional behaviors, which can include aggression, depression, and even resurgence of the behavior that we're trying to extinguish. Okay, no longer reinforce. So emotional behaviors are usually accompanied by the extinction process. So if you think of a person going to a vending machine and they put in their money and they push the button and the item that they chose doesn't come out, then they may be like, what the heck? And they may put money again in and say, maybe I didn't put enough coin, and may put additional coin, and it still doesn't come out. So they may start banging on the vending machine to see if something, if something is stuck, what's going on, or they may just get angry at the vending machine for not rewarding them. Okay, putting their money in and not getting the reward of the food that they want out. Okay, that would be kind of like an aggressive state. It's very common to have people become aggressive in the extinction procedure. We even talk about extinction-induced aggression, which is very common in humans. Okay, how do you think we think about, like I said, the idea of the vending machine not giving us what we want? And we think about the little kid in the store who got candy before, and they begin whining, and because they want the candy, but you decide that not today, you don't have money or don't have time or feel like they don't need to have the candy today, and the little child begins to whine. Okay, and you still refuse to give them the candy, and they may, the child may act even worse than whine. Okay. When we talk about resurgence, we're talking about the reappearance during extinction of the behaviors that have once been effective in obtaining the reinforcement. Okay. So going back to the whining, whining worked in the past to get the candy, but we don't want to see the whining, and we've been extinguishing the whining, but the child goes back to the whining because they remember when they whine, they got candy in the past. Okay, so this is kind of the resurgence of the behavior. If we get to the point where we are really at the point of the process of really extinguishing the behavior completely, the child may realize, in the case of the not getting the candy, it's not, no matter what they say or do, they're not going to get any candy anymore. And now they realize they lost what they love, the reinforcement, and they feel sad about it. Let's go back to the social media post. So I'm this social media person. I got a lot of likes on the things that I posted about a particular thing. People are liking and making comments. And then I start posting on things, a lot of things recently have been around conspiracy theories and fact versus fiction, which we're going to talk about next week when we talk about social psychology. And people stop responding, stop posting and replying or commenting on the things that the individual is posting or putting up. So they keep posting, but nobody's responding. So now they realize what was reinforcing for them before was the reactions that they got with the posts that they made and people commenting. No one is doing that any longer, which was very reinforcing for the individual. Now they feel very dejected and saddened by not receiving that reinforcement any longer. So the side effect of extinction can be a depressive state as well.